I finally played Night in the Woods, and much like Remedy Entertainment's Alan Wake, Night in the Woods is a video game that becomes both a metaphorical and allegorical story about oneself, in my opinion. But Alan Wake is still a masterpiece better because I say it is, but this isn't a video about that game, this is a video about gameplay-wise. Night in the Wood is so basic a toddler can play the game in one hand with a fistful of cereal in the other. You move your left thumbstick back and forth and press the X button to interact with the world around you when the game tells you you can interact with X, Y, and Z. The Demon Tower, however, is a tad more complicated or tricky because simplicity in a Legend of Zelda roguelike game is an understatement to how difficult the game can possibly be, as it slowly saps away your life force as you complete each level. But the overall objective of this silly game, which is on the main protagonist's computer, is that you, or Mae, because it's Mae playing the game who is being controlled by me who is playing this game and recording it, not trying to sound metaphysical, but that's what's really happening here on the computer screen. But the overall goal of this game is to navigate through these hazard-filled mazes, slashing and dashing to avoid attacks and obstacles, to obtain keys to defeat a boss to get to the next level. Whereas at the end of the game, apparently you bleed out and die because of existentialism, or existential nihilism, but the majority of this game is you running around like a chicken without a head. But strictly speaking about the overarching narrative from here on out, Night in the Woods is both an artistic and interactive narrative-based game where you, the player, are not in control because the non-playable character you play as isn't the center of the universe, and the control or agency you think you have is nothing but an illusion because you really are only the observer. You might be able to play the game, but at the end of the game plays you. When you discover these characters and the choices they make are too human and beyond you, the player, to manipulate the way you want them to go, simply because as the player, you aren't the player. You are the observer watching these characters interact with one another how they naturally interact with one another as if they were real. For example, there is a sequence in this game where you go to a college party. Beatrice, who doesn't go to college, goes to the party so she can feel some sort of self-value pretending to be someone she isn't for a few hours. This is because when her mother died, her future also died with her because her father sucks cliche. And you, the player, who is controlling Mae, comes along only to fuck that up for her. And this isn't because you as a player actively begin to swirl your friendship with her down a toilet by your hand. It's because Mae is an asshole personality-wise, thus creating the illusion of choice and control in this game. Sure, you have a choice, but this is who this character is, and you can't stop that. Even for someone like me who is a social invalid and struggles with interpersonal relationships could tell what was happening, and the main character messes that up nicely, because that's who she is, as she herself struggles to communicate as well. Because in this game, you are only the observer of these people's lives as they struggle with living with mental illness and whatever problems they have, as they become stronger together, reigniting their relationships that have become distant because of time, or watch them tear one another down and possibly drift farther apart. Even though the core theme of this game is friendship, you can imagine how the game ends. Happily, somewhat. Mae is the main lead of this soap opera fiasco. She isn't kind of a douchebag and an asshole. She is. But here's the crazy part. The story actually goes out of its way to give an explanation of why, unlike some horribly written games that don't know how to talk properly.
Now you're totally stuck in the retro zone. Sad face. Broken. Oh man, are you serial?
I'm Serial. Life is Strange is absolutely horrific, but again, that's an entirely different conversation. But other than that, the characteristics and well-rounded dialogue that defines Mae, she lives with depression, anxiety, anger issues, and some sort of unknown diagnosed dissociative disorder that causes lapses within her memory, distorting reality, possibly explaining why this entire game is comprised out of solid shapes showing her view of the world and how it lacks meaning to her. Other characters include Greg, who is the best character in the entire universe, who struggles with self-worth and value that comes to head in his high and low moments, which is a clear sign of bipolar disorder, but isn't explicitly said due to the very fact that the writers know how to write.
Crash? You mean stage diving, or?
You're such a poser. You can't even name a simple nose slide or a tray flip? You should walk on.
Then there's Beatrice, who struggles with identity after her mother dies from cancer, and her father has my favorite villainous and bad intentioned story written excuse, a psychotic break from reality, which automatically bumps her up to first chair in taking over the family business because someone has to do it, and because her deadbeat father won't anymore, she has to. Oh wait, there's this other character too. He's a bear. His name is Angus. I really don't know anything about him, so Greg swings his hands really good. I really like that about this game, cause Greg rules. And returning back to the tracks, the main character in this game is a dick. There isn't any other words to describe her, but they are, but I won't say them. Her problem is that she doesn't understand people's adversities in comparison to her own because she lived on the right side of town. This is both a physical and literal metaphor being a double-edged sword, considering Mae lives on the right side of town, and as she progressively goes left, the environment of her whole town becomes more run down, as stores are closed and the real estate value plummets to an all-time low, and Mae fails to recognize this until she becomes aware of it later within the story, discovering how privileged she is, as many of her friends and neighbors are disenfranchised because of the environment that they live in failing to evolve and change from what it once was. Mae as a character has something that everyone wants or has, and what she has she takes for granted because ironically each friend she does have a relationship with want what one another have. Beatrice wants to be Mae, Greg and Angus want to leave town like Mae, Mae wants to be like Beatrice, Angus kinda wishes he was Greg, and Greg kinda wishes that he was either Beatrice or Mae, and altogether, they are the best available friends for where they live. But Mae as a character is disassociated from all of that, and wants nothing more to simply live without responsibility, which she can do, but only because she has a safety net to do so and rely on, and a home to return to that's somewhat financially secure if everything goes horrifically wrong, which none of the characters have besides Mae. But despite being so well off, she is the most messed up out of all of them, considering she suffers from a dissociative break which caused her to drop out of college and come home because of her existential crisis that life is meaningless and nothing but shapes, as she puts it. Because the main problem and mental anguish Mae as a character is initially going through is that she's constantly asking herself a question of if and about if, and if is at the core of life, what is the value of if, and what would be her answer? And at the end of her journey, she does get that answer, and she's able to tell herself what she values. She's able to acknowledge she's a dickhead, and every step she took forward hurt those around her because she's a selfish brat who couldn't come to terms with her own morality because life was too hard to her, and sometimes too inconvenient, but that's what life is, never-ending struggle, till it does end. Life isn't a thing to pass through, life is but a thing itself, like leaves falling from a tree. It's supposed to hurt, and sometimes you have to let go of things that are gone and move on, but until that happens, she has to hope again, because then it all means something, and it's not all just shapes, it's all something, one big thing, or multiple of many things. After the death of Mae's grandfather, the answer to the original question of if was nihilism. At the end of the game, it becomes at the end of everything, hold on to anything. Friendship, memories, bonds, a dumb pizza place and taco store down the street that really doesn't sell good food but you eat at anyway because you can, because we're all gonna die. But it's just better to hang on to what we have now than what we could only wish and dream for and accept that for what it is, even though it might be oppressive, reductive, and insignificant. It's what we have, and we must hold on to it, because we as individuals aren't the interactive force that the universe circles around. Things happen, sometimes we deal with it, and sometimes we can't because it's out of our control. Counterintuitive of that belief is Call of Duty, which in short says, it's up to you and only you can do it because you're the only one available and have the skill sets to do it because the entire world centers around you and what you do now because the game says so, and you're the super important person because you are. Now go kill the bad guys, which you can only do and nobody else. This is because Call of Duty is a high-octane action thriller where the player is the most important thing that gravitates around the universe and the game world. And as for other shooters like Destiny, it's literally in the title, Destiny. It's up to you, you're the last guardian, it's your responsibility, and the entire universe now circles around you like the sun. Now go over there and kill the bad guys and do the thing and save the entire universe because there's an evil force out there and you're the only chosen one that can do it because you were chosen and the universe has chosen you. You are literally the ex machina that saves the entire universe. Night in the Woods is the complete opposite, and that's what ails the main protagonist and most of the cast of characters, telling them that you are not important, you're just a blimp in the giant, endless, expanding universe. Now, there are interactive video games that subvert narratives with the same message, like Crackdown 2, which from the start of the game, you're told you're the only agent alive within this organization of superpowers, and there's a woman named Caitlin Thorne, and she's evil, who does evil things because she's evil, and she's so evil that she experiments on homeless people and children for her own evil scientific agenda, that she's completely without morals to fulfill whatever her evil agenda is, and only you can stop her, but that's far from the truth, and you can only play the game one way once you become aware of the truth, if you look for it, because you as the player observing the character knows the truth, but not the protagonist, because the protagonist didn't look for the truth, because it's not in his nature. Because the truth is, one simple lie, which was telling the player and the main protagonist that he was special, drove him and the player on a power trip so psychotically strong, he and the player obeyed a voice with questionless loyalty to the point where you became the villain, killing people who were trying to help other people from the agency that started the outbreak of the entire game, because you were the bad guy. And the biggest plot twist of them all, you were not important. You were just a pawn in a plan. Spec Ops: The Line also plays with this non-important main character theme. It's a 7-hour game, but you can complete the game in the first 15 minutes because you beat the game in the first 15 minutes of the game, until the self-righteous main protagonist Walker says, "The line in the sand is where I say it is," and goes on his merry way and slaughters hundreds of innocent people for what he perceives as right. But that's not even the biggest plot twist of the game. The plot twist of the game is that the main character is disassociated from reality. In fact, there is a lot that doesn't make sense in this game. For example, you can find your two dead teammates who are very much alive in the first 30 minutes of the game. But that logic doesn't matter, because the main character you play as, whose name is Walker, is crazy as hell in a very Apocalypse Now kind of way. The game itself even tries to communicate this information to you, but due to the standardization of this kind of genre in video games, most people don't read what's going on or look at the loading screens unless they last more than 30 seconds, and others barely scratch the surface of environmental storytelling at play because this is a point-and-shoot kind of game that bites you in the ass with its ending reveal. But ultimately the answer is yes. Spec Ops: The Line is an allegorical critique of Call of Duty. The game tells you you're important, the main character pretends to be a hero, and your reward is that you've killed hundreds of people for a reason your protagonist can barely justify without having a dissociative break so mind-numbingly powerful he had to create a fictitious villain to justify why he did those horrible things, because the truth was inconvenient, thus he created a new perception of what was real, so then in turn he could feel important and feed his self-righteous ego trip. At the end of the game, your character finally becomes aware of this, and you, the player, have the interactive choice of letting Walker kill himself in the belief that he's atoned for his sins, or the second ending where you don't let him commit suicide, then a bunch of American soldiers try to rescue him, but you can kill them and run back into Dubai like John Rambo, which is a rather artisanal ending to this extremely violent affair. But I mentioned Spec Ops: The Line in detail because Walker and Mae from Night in the Woods suffer from the same issue but are put in less extreme environments and handle their situations differently. Whereas Walker indulges his break from reality, putting the truth into a fictional villain he created to justify what he's done, Mae goes back home in an attempt to reinvent herself and find answers for the void that's within her, indulging in violence occasionally to escape running away from her problems. But overall, what makes Night in the Woods artistic is that much like the two games I just explained, Night in the Woods isn't about a large objective achieved by Mae and only Mae because she's the only one that's there and is available. She isn't the all-powerful ex machina that can change things, she isn't the chosen one, she's just small, and she isn't celebrated for it because she has her own problems. And that's what makes this game interesting. It's the interactivity between the protagonist and the player, and turns the idea that you actually have some say into what a character believes is what you believe, turning the interactivity on its heads, making making it a compelling experience viewing the lives of these characters. It's the small things, like Beatrice driving 2 hours to go to a college party when she doesn't even go to college so she can pretend to have control over her life because her future was ruined by her mother when she died. For Greg to acknowledge his self-worth, he needs self-validations for the things he does, even though sometimes they might be sociopathic and have a complete disregard for people's safety. Perhaps he is truly a good person, yet a little eccentric. But discussing the elephant in the room, that being the Cthulian god and the minds and the mystery revolving around the characters and Casey, interestingly enough, everything in this game is connected. Normal in a TV show, something like characters disappearing would be brought to the forefront of the narrative, but it's only there if you notice it's there, that including all the little details expanding the lore of the town. But the entire basis of the cult is that it's an analogy that mirrors the characters in game. As time continues, the town becomes slowly obsolete, but it distorts its belief that somehow killing 39 people in total every once in a while would somehow save Possum Springs, rejuvenating it to its former glory, made these people kill and sacrifice other people so they can hold on to an idyllic memory that was long gone. The cult itself is comprised of old people who want the lives they used to have, a life where you busted your ass and got shit done and got money, instead of a life where you busted your ass and got pennies and a pat on the back for your effort. That's what they killed for. They wanted the old town, which was known for its industrialized mining, but that town is gone, and because it's gone and it can't be brought back, they somehow made a huge leap in logic to where killing people who are disenfranchised social rejects who are struggling somehow brought prosperity to the town, and when they didn't, tragedy strikes like a horrible flood, which is mentioned in the beginning of the game. This of course is showcasing the negatives of holding on to something for so long and not letting it go, but it's also there to showcase how bad someone can turn out to be if they don't learn to let go of their youth and past, stopping them from growing. Hell, you might join a cult that suffers from a mass psychosis that believe Cthulhu is real, or maybe the Cthulian god is real and our main cast of characters just accidentally buried it and all its cult members alive, then left them for dead, which might piss off the Cthulian mind god. But that doesn't matter because that's when the game ends, and the only thing that matters is that the characters are friends and they're together till the end. So overall, I finally played Night in the Woods and I liked it. It's a game I'll remember not because of its Demon Tower minigame, but because of the character interactions and the small moments that made the characters who they are, defining them as people, breaking the boundary from non-playable character to actual people who embodies people with real issues. I'll never forget the time I fed those rats inside that giant doll, or when I sprayed people with water with the water fountain in the mall because I could and because it was fun, or the band sessions I had with friends when my hand-eye coordination was decent because those buttons combos are sometimes insanely unreasonable. But in the end, Night in the Woods is awesome, but most importantly, Greg rules, okay?